Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sure you're expecting somebody much younger. I always love the look on people's faces when I show up. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes to make sure I don't talk too long. And I do want to just recognize David, just because he is my predecessor. Obviously, a lot of experience. He's been very helpful to me as I've transitioned into the job as director of AmeriCorps VISTA, a territory he occupied some years ago. And to Hapen M., someone who I worked with at the White House, and we did some exciting collaborations together, and serves on the board of our home agency, the Corporation for National and Community Service. And to Tess and Peter, I'm very glad to meet you, sister and brother in service. I look forward to working with you going forward. David read a bit of my biography. I like to sort of start with the other biography, and that is that I'm the second of 5 kids born to a teenage mom who had immigrated to Maryland when my granddad was in the Peace Corps, went to serve in a small island called Palau, and brought home a wife and 2 daughters. So they were in Maryland, but she made some decisions, and 5 of us showed up. So, and my dad wasn't around most of that time. And the struggle that we went through, not that I grew up in a log cabin or anything, but it wasn't easy. Teenage mom on her own with 5 kids. We were supported in large part by faith-based organizations in Maryland in the 80s. Some of them supported by VISTAs. And just a note on VISTA, for those that don't know what it is, it's the Domestic Peace Corps. It'll be 50 years old next year. It was one of the original War on Poverty programs started in 1965. And the way VISTA works is we send our people into nonprofits around the country that are in the fight against poverty. Because you usually see this pattern of nonprofits, especially the medium and small ones. They'll grow up to a point and then hit a ceiling. They'll serve X number of people because that's all they can do with the money they have, but they can't grow. So what VISTA does is we send our people in as individuals or teams where they focus for 1 to 3 years on nothing but capacity building. So as that soup kitchen nonprofit is working on feeding people, our VISTAs are in that soup kitchen nonprofit in the back office writing grant proposals, developing volunteer recruitment strategies, soliciting donations, developing fundraising campaigns. And the interesting thing about VISTA, it's a relatively small government program. We have about 8,000 members. But our 8,000 members engage more than 1 million volunteers for the nonprofits they were serving at. Our $100 million budget, our VISTAs generated $160 million in cash and in-kind donations for the nonprofits they were serving at. So what we do is make good things better, take proven models and help them scale up in a sustainable way so that at the end of the 1 to 3 years, when they leave, the nonprofit can continue to grow on what was built. It's not falling back to square one because we took away the resource. In many cases, it's a free resource to the nonprofit because it would be terrible to sort of say to a struggling nonprofit that's at the ceiling, we'll give you our people, but pay us for them. So it's a taxpayer-funded program that we cover their living stipend. Nobody's getting rich. They're paid, their wages are tied to the poverty line, actually. So we cover their living stipend, interest on their student loans, child care, health care in some cases. So it's a free resource largely to these nonprofits to help them get past that ceiling and grow into a place where they're a medium or large nonprofit. But it's a wonderful program I've been at the helm of for 5 months. But my first order of business is making sure more people know what it is, especially as we approach our 50th anniversary. It's one of the best programs in the country that people have no idea what it is. So please check out AmeriCorps VISTA just by visiting nationalservice.gov. As I mentioned, we're coming up on our 50th anniversary next year. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary of AmeriCorps 2 Fridays ago. We're housed at AmeriCorps, so 2015 marks 50 years of us working hand in hand with the private sector. It's a very innovative program in that we're not giving money out to nonprofits. We're actually sending our people to work with nonprofits. It's one of the oldest public-private partnerships that the government has run. And it's a successful one, going back to the stats I shared with you. And as David mentioned, I started working for the president when he was a senator in 2006 over in Capitol Hill in D.C. And a lot of folks talk about him being a community organizer. They leave out some things. They leave out that he was working with churches. He was funded by a grant from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development to do the work he was doing on the south side of Chicago. And he ran a nonprofit that worked, among other things, with young men that were struggling to find purpose, to not only a job, but purpose. So he has a long-standing commitment to national service and this idea that whatever else America is about, it's about this non-negotiable that you have to contribute something to the society you're part of. Going back to de Tocqueville, being struck by how religious we were as a people, and this idea of service, this obligation to serve the community, where in Europe you have a lot of top-down, the sort of absolute monarch that is there by divine right. In America, the exact opposite, where you had, village government, city government, town government, state government, before you had any federal government. So this idea that we build communities at the grassroots level, and we have an obligation to do that. And you see his commitment manifested in many different ways. I think one thing I do want to point to, just because it's coming up this week, is the Campus Interfaith Challenge. And in my last job at the White House, I was the director of religious engagement. You see this interesting phenomenon where you have on a college campus so many different student ministries, all of them committed to service, all of them doing it on their own. Serving, food, or cleaning up a park, or mentoring kids, or tutoring students, all of them doing it within the confines of their tradition. And it's not that hard to see why, if you look at just religious attendance. The often cited quote by Dr. King about the most segregated hour in America. The sort of phenomena of everybody is concerned with others, everyone's focused on serving the community, but we serve in silos generally. Certainly there are exceptions to that. And so the Campus Interfaith Challenge is the president's call for universities and colleges to bring together campuses to say, how are we going to attack a problem in the community together? Across Hillel and the Jewish Student Union and the Catholic student ministries and Lutheran student ministries and the Muslim student groups. Across the board, how do we focus together and serve one another, and indirectly have that conversation? As we get to know one another through service, we get to know one another as well, and more about the religious traditions we all adhere to. So I think it's the 5th or 6th annual Campus Interfaith Challenge conference is going to be at George Washington University this Monday and Tuesday. But over at our program at AmeriCorps VISTA, there's so many places where we're already partnering with faith-based organizations. Habitat for Humanity, for example, is one of our major partners. We just launched a new core this past Thursday with Secretary Castro from HUD and EPA Administrator McCarthy with one of our longstanding grantees, Grid Alternatives. Grid Alternatives started in California, and I'm not putting words in their mouth. They say they would not exist at the level they do but for VISTA. They're a nonprofit organization that seeks to bring alternative energy, specifically solar technology, into low-income areas. They're probably going to be the last to get it if it's allowed to just happen organically. But not just bringing the technology to the community, but helping install it so that utility bills can be lowered, so these low-income families have some relief, and using local use to install them. So giving those young men and women actual skills that are marketable to help them hopefully get into some of these green jobs of the future. They just were able to grow from their base in California, heading east. They just opened their Washington, D.C. Outfit on Thursday, where they'll be serving Virginia and parts of Pennsylvania. But working with Habitat for Humanity to build the homes as Grid is putting in solar technologies. And Habitat obviously is one of our nation's most foremost faith-based organizations. With Justice AmeriCorps, another VISTA project, with the crisis of unaccompanied minors on the border we've seen over the last 8 months, the surge anyway, Justice AmeriCorps is a VISTA project that brings together lawyers and paralegals that serve as legal representation for these young people, children in most cases, that are being moved through a judicial process where they don't know what's going on. Besides the language barrier, a child in a legal process who has no conception of what's going on, they should at least have representation moving through the process so they have a voice in that process. Whatever happens and whatever the process comes up with, whether they're removed or allowed asylum, they should have a voice. And so Justice AmeriCorps is a project we're working on with Catholic Charities, because Catholic Charities is obviously all over the country, but a robust operation on the border, especially in Texas, where a lot of these children are coming across the McAllen, Brownsville area, where they're focused on the basic human needs of these children. Regardless of what they're doing here and what happens to them in the judicial process, they should be fed, they should be clothed, they should be housed, and they should be treated with the dignity that every human being deserves. The My Brother's Keeper initiative is another area where we're sort of taking the president's lead. This initiative focused on minority men and boys, knowing the terrible numbers when it comes to father absence in many communities, but most acutely in the African American community, upwards of 70% of African American households with no father there. And what happens when the family structure is in that state? You have any number of the pathologies I don't have to tell you. Oh, that's 10 minutes. So that's one of our greatest, that's one of our greatest new initiatives where VISTAs are helping scale up nonprofits that are serving a population where the dad is often not there, and keeping them either on track or helping them find the track back, where we're working on rehabilitation, ex-offender re-entry into society, so they're not permanently in a subset of society that has no pathway back to being a productive member of society. So just since I'm over time, public-private partnership, again, 50 years VISTA has shown it's not just the government. We cannot do it by ourselves, but hand in hand with the private sector and faith-based organizations. The federal government can do a lot, and we do. But when it gets into the issues of the heart, the issues of purpose, the issues of culture, when you talk about creating a culture of service, I think it presumes a level of a culture that believes in sort of responsibility, accountability, and care for others instead of just being self-absorbed. That's why the partnerships, I believe, work, because it's not simply us trying to throw money around. It's working hand in glove with the folks that can actually have the experience and expertise to attack the issues of the heart that are, I think, at the root of a lot of these issues. So thanks very much, and I look forward to the conversation.